Hey everyone, Matt here with Moesif to show you how to get API monetization rolling with Kong, Stripe, and Moesif. Now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the Kong developer portal to create developer accounts. We'll then generate keys. Those keys will then be used to access the API. What will happen really in the background is each of those keys will then be linked to usage over in Moesif. A Moesif billing meter, which we'll create, will then tally up that usage and pass that usage over to Stripe so that that customer can be billed for that API usage. Now, as you can see, I'm already logged into the Kong developer portal. I'm running Kong locally on my machine through Docker. However you're running it may change exactly how you do things, but everything should be relatively similar. Now, there's a few things for us to discuss before we get started. There are a few things that are expected or prerequisites that we have in mind here, which are you should have a running instance of Kong with an endpoint and a route created. As you can see, I have a /test service path to my HTTP bin route. The next is that you have key auth enabled for your endpoints. Now on mine, I've enabled this globally. You also need to make sure that you've enabled the Kong developer portal. You'll also have to have an active Stripe account. You'll need an active Moesif account as well. And you also should have the Kong Moesif plugin configured as well. Now, when all of that is done, and there's plenty of documentation and videos on how to do that, then we can get started with monetization. So the first thing that we'll do is I've already created a few prices in Stripe. So let me come over here, a few products and prices. The specific one we'll be looking at here will be this My API. If we wanted to add a new product, we could do that here, but let me show you exactly what this looks like so you can have roughly the same configuration. So as you can see, I've created this My API product. With that, I've created a price. And what you'll see when you're configuring your prices, the usage type needs to be metered usage. The aggregation mode should be sum across all usage records during period. Currency can be whatever you'd like, interval, monthly, and then you can set this stuff as you need to. Once you've done that, then you'll have a product that we can then use in Moesif and essentially in Kong as well. So we'll come over to our Kong manager again, which is our user interface for actually interacting with our Kong gateway. And over on the side here, you should see Dev Portal. If you don't, that means you probably haven't enabled it yet. Make sure that the dev portal is enabled and then come down to editor. And we're going to do two things here. We're going to create a monetization.js file. And then we're also going to override the default kong.auth.js so that when a user is created, the user is created in Kong, it's created in Stripe, and it's also created in Moesif. To do that, we'll come down here to themes, base, assets, JS, third party, and under third party, we will do new file, and the file type will be themes because that's where it's going to be sitting. And the path to that is going to be base/assets/JS/third party /monetization.js. And this should create our new file for us. So we'll click create file. You'll see that this then comes up. We'll get rid of the default there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of code here to actually get this started. So the first thing that we're going to do in this monetization.js is create a credentials object. And you can pause the video. I'm going to actually copy and paste from the companion blog so that it runs a bit quicker for you, but feel free to pause the video and then play as you need to. So we're going to do this with a credentials object. It will have a Stripe API key and it will have a Moesif app ID. Let's get both of those values right now. So if we come back into Stripe, we come to developers and we come to API keys, I'm going to grab my secret key here You can do this with a restricted key as well if you'd like to. I'm going to click to copy, come back over to my dev portal, and in front of bearer, we will paste our key in. For the Moesif ID, make sure that you've logged into Moesif, and then what you'll do is you will come down to the settings menu here. We'll go to API keys, and here you can see your collector application ID for your account. We'll copy that, come back over here, and we will paste that. And that gives us our credentials that we're going to need to access these APIs. Our next step is going to be to write some code here to create our Stripe customer. Again, I'm going to copy and paste this from our companion blog, which I'll link in the details for this video, but I will go through it line by line. So we're going to create a create Stripe customer function. That function is going to take a full name and an email. Obviously, you could pass more stuff into it if you wanted to. Our form is going to be relatively basic for that developer onboarding. And then what we'll do is we're going to do an AJAX call. The type will be post. The URL is going to be the Stripe API, so api.stripe.com/v1/customers. And this endpoint is going to allow us to create a customer. In the headers, you'll see we have an authorization header, and we're using that credentials.stripe API key. Again, you could hard code this in here if you wanted to. This just makes it a little easier to use. And then the data that we're going to pass will be right here. We'll have email and name, and we'll pass the variables that we've passed into the function. On success, what we'll do is we will assign the Stripe customer ID that's going to be held in data.id, which is the returned payload. And as you can see up here, we've already created this. Then if we'll put our error clause in here as well, our error function. And lastly, once this is run, we will do Stripe customer ID and we will return that. Now, you'll also see that I have async equal to false. The reason why I've done this is because I want this function to run in a synchronous fashion. So I want to create a Stripe customer, then I want to create the subscription, then I want to create the user in Moesif. Of course, you probably could do this async as well, but I did find that there were some issues. So I've set that to async as false, if you're wondering why I have that chunk in the code. So we've created this create Stripe customer. As I mentioned, the next thing that we're going to want to do is create the Stripe subscription. And for that, we will create another function just underneath this one. Go like this. Let me just switch over to code view here. Now we have another function called create Stripe subscription. It will take a Stripe customer ID and it will take a Stripe price key, because when you create a subscription, that subscription is created based on a Stripe price. Again, you could hard code these things, but this just makes it a little more modular. So we've created a Stripe subscription ID variable up here, setting it as undefined. Then same thing as before, type is post, URL is going to be /v1/subscriptions this time. We'll call the subscriptions endpoint. Again, async is false. We've added our authorization header in here, and then we have data that we're going to pass. And if you actually want to see what this data could look like, you can go to the Stripe API docs, which are actually really, really well done. For our purposes here, we're going to do the bare minimum, which is we need to pass a customer ID, and that's going to be in a customer field. And then we can pass an array of items that we want on the subscription. For this specific one, we're just going to pass the Stripe price key that we've passed into this method. On success, we'll get the subscription ID that will pull out of the data in the ID field that comes back in it. And we have our error function as well. Lastly, we're going to return Stripe subscription ID here. Now, the last thing that we want to do here is create the Moesif user. So we've created the Stripe customer, we've subscribed them to something. Now what we want to do is we actually want to make this so that Moesif is able to essentially full circle that path so that we can have someone create an API key, then they can use that usage will go into Moesif. And then Moesif will be able to link that usage over to Stripe. To do that, we need to associate this user correctly in Moesif. So to do that, what we'll do is create another function, and that function is going to be called create Moesif user. This function here will take an email, the full name parameter, and a Stripe subscription ID. Then we'll do another post. This time, instead of going to the Stripe API, we're going to call api.moesif.net/v1/users, and this is our users endpoint. Again, async is false. And we have a couple of things here to pass in the headers. So we'll pass an accept header, and then we'll also pass the Moesif application ID, which is where we will pass our Moesif app ID that we created up here, that we got from our app. That's going to associate this specific API call with that Moesif account. In the data field, what we'll do, I'm going to JSON.stringify it so that it works correctly with the API, but I'm going to pass a user ID, a company ID, and some metadata. So the user ID is going to be the email, the company ID is going to be the Stripe subscription ID, and in metadata, we're just going to pass the full name. You don't have to do this part, but I just want to show you that we do have some customization that we can do in terms of what we're going to put into Moesif under that user's account. On success, we're just going to console.log the data, and on error, we will run this function. So that creates our file. Now let's save these changes. So you've saved those. Again, if you want to go to the blog has all this code kind of end to end. So we've got our monetization file created. Now let's actually use this. And to do that, we'll come back over to Kong, the kong.auth.js. And what you'll see is I'm going to come down to this window.kong.auth.register. And we don't have to worry about any of this stuff here. What we'll do is on the new promise that's created here in the success, we will add a little bit of code. So what we're going to do is we'll call our Stripe create user or create customer, our Stripe create subscription, and create the user in Moesif. What we'll do is run a few lines of code. So it's actually only 3 lines of code since we've taken that and made it bundled it up nicely in that monetization.js file. So I'm just going to format this quickly. There we go. And what you'll see in this first line is we get the customer ID by calling this create Stripe customer. We pass fields.meta.fullname. So this is actually going to come from the form field that we'll be using in the registration. And then we'll also grab the email from that as well. The next thing we'll do is create the subscription in Stripe. For that, we'll pass the customer ID, which we got from creating the Stripe customer, and a price key. Now, if we come back over to Moesif, and we come over to products, my API, this is the price key we're going to use. So this is the 10 cents USD per unit. There could be multiple price keys here as well, but we'll just take this one, and we'll paste it here. Again, as you play around more with this setup, there are ways that you could probably build a drop-down in so that people could manage their subscriptions through here. You could also use the Stripe portal to be able to do that as well. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to monetization. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. The fact that there's lots of ways to do it, discovering each of those ways is a little tricky. So we've got this plugged in. We've got our customer ID that we created from the Stripe customer and our price. And then we've got our create Moesif user, which takes fields.email in the email space. So if I hover over this, you would have seen that it takes an email, takes a full name and a subscription ID. We're grabbing that here. Then, just like we did before, we're grabbing from fields.meta.fullname. And then we're passing the subscription ID that we created here. That's all we have to do in this file here. So let's do save. Our issue being that we actually don't have the monetization included in our website yet. And to do that, what we'll do is we'll come down to And within themes, base, and then partials, we'll go to theme and then required scripts. Now, our script is specifically dependent on jQuery, so we definitely need to make sure we do it underneath here. And since we're using it in Kong.auth.js, we want to make sure that it's included before that. So to add that in, what we'll do is we will add a script tag which points to where our monetization.js is. So it's under assets/js/third-party/monetization.js. And we're going to save this. And at this point, we should be able to use the dev portal to create an account. So I'm going to exit out of editor mode, come down to overview. This is our dev portal link here. Obviously, you don't have to go this way if you don't want to. I'm going to open link in a new tab. You'll see this as our dev portal. I'm going to click sign up. Full name, I'll do Matt Test, do Matthew@moesif.com, and we'll just do a password here. I'm going to click create account. And you'll see here that it's moved me over into the dashboard of the developer portal. Let's go make sure that everything worked correctly in Stripe. So if we come back here, we come to customers, we can see Matt Test was created. I'm going to click on this here. You'll see that I've been subscribed to the My API price. So we know this part has worked correctly. What we can do now is in our dev portal, we can do create API credential, create API credential. Now what we'll see here is an API key. Now if I bring up Postman, I already have this service, which is localhost 8000. That's what I have it running on, /test service. Depending on how you have your API key set up, configured in Kong, mine, the key is going to be API with a uppercase K and then EY. So API key, I'm going to paste my API key in here, click send. I'll send 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and you see that the request went through. We should also see that pop up here in the Kong usage, which we can see this spike here with a few requests. Now what I want to do is come back to Moesif and just quickly check our live event log. So you see I clicked plus new, live event log, and you'll see here Matt@Moesif, and then sub, which is the subscription that would have been created. So this means that we're working end to end. Our last thing that we want to do is actually set up a billing meter in Moesif. To do this, we'll come back into Moesif and we'll go to billing meters. You'll see that I've already got quite a few set up, but let's set up a new one here. So we'll do add billing meter. Now from here, we'll call this Kong test meter. You can call it whatever you'd like. I'll then grab my Stripe billing provider stuff, come over to product. I've created a product before called My API. You can see I've got a few things that I've set up here. I'll select My API, and I'll select the price that I want this usage to go towards. This price here the price ID should link up with the price ID that you've hard coded into your Kong portal code. So we've got that set up. Now what we'll do is I want to actually monetize my /test service endpoint. So we'll do request, URI route is test service. Now this will automatically populate with any available route. Now if you haven't put any calls through yet, you can actually type it in as well and then press enter and it will add it. And you can click this here as well. So I'll click test service. Then I also want to make sure that I'm only monetizing calls where the response status code is equal to 200. We could pick some different metrics here. We could pick event count, unique users, sessions, latency, request body count, response body count, or create a custom metric. What I'm going to do is create one with event count. So every single event that comes through or API call is going to be counted towards usage. Now I've got this set up. That's all I need to do. Then I need to click create. create billing meter. Now what will pop up is billing meter successfully created. The meter, Kong test meter, was created. Now let's test the end-to-end flow with Stripe to ensure it's working. So I'll do continue. The first step is it's going to make sure that Stripe is enabled and that our Kong test meter is enabled as well. Then we'll click next. So you can see that I've already have some usage over here. So it might pick up on some of the requests that you sent through and those initial ones that we sent. So if you haven't created a subscription yet, what you need to do is you need to go through and you need to go through the Kong registration like we did before. So if we come back here where we did sign up, you need to run through this. If you have an issue, which who knows, you may, you should be able to see it in the developer console as well. So if you have an issue, this issue is defaulted by the portal. But if you have, let's just say something's wrong with your JavaScript, you'll be able to see it in the console here. Same way that you would when you're debugging a regular JavaScript application. Now, what we'll do is we will come back to this here. Once you've had a subscription that's received, so this may take a few minutes, then you'll see subscriptions received. This is what you want to see. That ensures that subscriptions are being created correctly for this meter. If we click next, the next screen we'll come to will be part 2, which is make API calls for the created subscriptions. Let's go last hour. What you'll see is that we want to send some more API requests, and I'll bring my Postman back up here, send a couple through, and we should see these calls come through here. Now you can see that I've already have some that have been received because I've used this configuration before. But if you haven't used it before, likely it'll say that it's waiting. There's our 4 that we just sent. So we sent 4 through, you'll see them pop up here. Once you've done that, you can click next. And this part is the part that may take a few minutes. So what this will do is this is going to sync usage over to Stripe, and then Stripe will then, through that webhook that we created, bring that back into Moesif. This is going to make sure that our billing meter and Stripe, all our subscription stuff is working correctly. This may take a little bit of time. So my next sync is expected at 5 p.m. If I were to wait until after 5 p.m., this will be populated. And I'll show you in another billing meter that I've already created what that looks like. So the Kong test meter is created, but let me show you what that last step looks like from one that's already received it. So if I come up to test meter on this one, and I come through to create subscription, send API calls, and come to verify results, what you will see is you'll see a company ID, subscription ID, and then you'll see a metric value. Of course, this meter hasn't been used for a bit, so I don't have any metrics here, but generally it would show you what reported usage it would report for that period. Now let's head back to our meter here. And now that we have things active, let me just send a couple more requests through. And what you'll eventually see in Stripe when you come back to Stripe, if you come to customers, now I'll go to one again that I already have some usage that's been billed to. You come into the customer profile, click on the subscription that you're billing to, and then if you do view usage, you'll be able to see the units used. And this should match up with the metering in Moesif as well. And what it's going to happen here is at the end of this billing cycle, this customer will then get a bill, and then they can pay it all through Stripe. And that's how you do end-to-end monetization with the Kong Developer Portal, Moesif, and Stripe. Thanks for joining, and if you want to check out more monetization content and different solutions for monetization, check out our website, moesif.com.